I love being able to see people discover what they are truly capable of. And then they're able to, especially with the instructors that I work with, they're able to then take that out and share that with their communities.
Thank you for listening to the Interesting People You Meet podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Newground Financial. Newground Financial is a full-service investment and insurance brokerage firm that specializes in employee benefit plans, corporate insurance, and retirement planning. Newground Financial serves the provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Ontario, and Alberta. Find out more at newgroundfinancial.com. Thank you for liking, sharing, and commenting on the Interesting People You Meet podcast across all of your favorite listening platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. By doing so, you are ensuring that more great people just like you have the opportunity to hear from our guests. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Well, welcome to episode 37 of the Interesting People You Meet. We have our co-host Nick Matheson here and myself, Nick Momberket, and our special guest today is Laurissa Manning. We're really excited to have you with us, Laurissa. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So to get started, Laurissa, we thought it would be very interesting to just kind of ask, hey, who's Laurissa? We know you, we know of you, and hopefully our audience can learn a lot more after this podcast. So why don't you give us maybe a brief background of kind of how you ended up here today?
For sure. Well, I'm Laurissa. Grew up in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, here in Canada. Had a varied background, I would say, probably career-wise. Started out studying actually languages and worked for some time as an event manager in the States. So spent some time there, got to use my languages there, which was great. Then came back home after 9/11. That was a bit of a shock or shaker for us. So we moved back to be closer to family. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Serial entrepreneurs from my grandfather, my parents. They've owned restaurants, IT companies. So it's always, been in my blood pretty much to do something, create something. So when we did come back home, I decided that I was going to go back into the events, but have my own event company. So did that for a few years. At the same time, purchased a small basket company and was doing gift baskets in the basement, making those for a little while, and then got pulled into my parents' IT company. And in the company there, I was doing their events because they traveled all over the world, running, attending different conferences and whatnot. So I was doing the events and then got pulled into managing people as well. So did some of the HR there. And then decided that, well, my husband was working for the company too, and that didn't go very well, having the two of us in the same company. So then I decided, okay, I really want to follow my passion. And so one of my things that I'm super passionate about and have been ever since the age of 18 has been fitness. So throughout my life, I've always been, teaching fitness classes and, just bringing people together with health and wellness. So I decided to open a gym. So left the company and opened the first boutique fitness studio east of Montreal. And we bought we bought a building in downtown Dartmouth, did that building out and worked on that for a while, brought in some really cool equipment, had great instructors, and it was really just about building a community. Absolutely loved the community that we had built. But after a few years, I actually found it to be a little bit lonely, being the only one in the business. Lots of clients and staff, but they don't have the same buy-in that you as the owner has, right? There's just a little bit more skin in the game when sometimes you're having to decide, do I pay myself or do I pay the staff? And obviously it's the staff who we're gonna pay. So I decided that I thought it would be a good idea to go back to working in the corporate world. So we sold the business, which was also interesting because even though the business had its own name, it was very much connected to me. So it took us a year to be able to separate myself from the business, like, or what people considered to be me, so that we could actually sell the business. So we were able to do that successfully. That was great. And so then I thought, oh, I'm just going to go back into the corporate world like I was in the States. And I had a really hard time finding a role. I was, putting my CVs out there and just wasn't getting anything back. And it actually hit me really hard. I, was starting to think, well, what's my worth? And like, can I actually do things? And so I was lucky to be able to start a role just really covering somebody's mat leave. And so did that for a little while, but just sort of trying to figure out what was right for me. And then eventually I actually moved over to the Black Business Initiative, went in there to run strategy and community relations there. Really enjoyed that. That was actually the first time being in that type of atmosphere, like a non-for-profit, and enjoyed the work. Not necessarily the always having to go for government money. That was something that I didn't enjoy. But learned a lot while I was there working with Ruston Southwell, and getting actually to know the Black community in Nova Scotia better, which sounds ironic or sort of funny. Growing up here, I really hadn't been part of the Black community in the true sense of it. So it was really an interesting experience for me there. And while working there, I ran into a colleague, a friend of both Nick and I, and just she was coming in just to meet with her name is Dorothy Spence. She was coming in just to meet with Rustum, and she walked by my office door, and we sort of just locked eyes. I sort of describe it sometimes as almost there was like a love at first sight type thing. That's the only way that I can describe it, Nick. It was such a weird connection that we had. And I jumped up from my desk, went into the elevator and rode down on the elevator with her, and we were just chatting a little bit. And that was really, I think, where the start of my sort of different life started, was in meeting Dorothy. I ended up going to one of her programs called the Purpose Led Business School, and spent 5 days with her. And that was really where we spent time, looking and discovering your purpose and your values. And that was where I was able to actually connect the dots and figure out, when I was sending those resumes all around and thinking, oh my gosh, I have no value, like why, like what's happening here? I was able to figure out the thread that all the different roles that I've had in my life, what they were and how they were connected. And what I discovered was, even though I'd had a gym, I'd, run a conference center in the States, I had an event management company, I'd been in the IT business. It was all about creating community, is what it's always been for me. So that thread that ran through everything was building community and ensuring that communities were thriving. And the gym was really the piece where I, got to really see that and still see the ripple effects from it now, 10 years later, where people still reach out and, they keep in touch with me, letting me know what they're doing, et cetera. So that really started me down that road. And so then I left the BBI and actually went and joined Dorothy at her business and started working with her in leadership and businesses, working with small and medium-sized enterprises and helping them scale. So again, learning something else new, taking all of my background and bringing that along. And that's where I met Nick as well. Yeah. And here I am now. I now have my own company once again. I've come to the realization that I am not one to be employed by others. This is how I say it. I guess it's just that entrepreneur bug. Happy to bring my mindset into other businesses and help them, but I love being able to have variety. And so if I can come in, help you with what you need help with, and then be able to just let you fly and do your thing, that makes me the happiest. I'm not, so I've got a consulting company right now, or a coaching company, I think I would call it. My partner and I, we are working a lot with nonprofits actually, and we go in and help coach leadership team, but then also working with the larger team in helping them actually implement the strategy that we are helping them build. So I love that in and out. And I was saying to a client last week who I actually had to fire. I said to them, my goal is not to be with you forever. My goal is really to get you to a place where you can, do what needs to be done on your own. If you need to call me back in or anything like that, but I really want you. And this was always the way with my personal training clients as well. I didn't want to have a personal training client forever. And it was always, I want to be able to get you to the point where you're able to do these things for yourself and you have that motivation and you can build and et cetera. So that's how I approach the work that I do with my clients. One of the things I guess I'll just share because I think it sort of plays into all of the pieces that I've done in my work is when I was with Dorothy at the Purpose Led Business School, I had to discover or I had to articulate my purpose. And what I came up with after months of past the school was that I illuminate and empower authentic voice. And so for some people, they're like, what does that mean? Because initially, when I had written it down at the school, it was I empower authentic voice. And when I went away and I'd had some time to think about it, I was actually off on like a medical leave type thing. I thought, no, that's not it. That gives me too much power, I guess, is one way to say it. But really what I think about is that's a piece of it, but being able to shine that light for somebody else on that voice for them. And when I go back and look at all the things that I've done, I always like to be in the background. I'm not one who likes to be, up front. I can teach a fitness class and go to town with it, no problem. But most of the time I like to be behind and just sort of shining that light so that somebody else can, step into whatever they need to do.
I love how you phrase it about bringing your mindset to other organizations as well and kind of the value of that. Great story, really diverse and interesting background.
Yeah.
I've actually just learned a lot about many of the things that you do. It's also interesting to
Yeah.
me about how that often feels like a mismatch with more corporate roles and that kind of thing. When you have that independence and you have all those different skills that you've developed over your life. Also, Dorothy's a great catalyst for that connection with purpose and fascinating how you've told that story too. Tell us a little bit more about how community and building community is showing up in your work today and kind of how that's being expressed for you.
Yeah, for sure. So prior to moving into DLM, which is our company, we were working mainly with for-profits. Love for-profits, but Lauren and I, my partner, were really seeing that there was a need to be able to, take that mindset of for-profit and bring that into the non-for-profit. Heaven forbid that they actually, be sustainable. And so, that was one piece of really starting to think about that. And then the community piece, when we go into the organizations that we're working with, it's really about being able to create a community first internally with their culture, ensuring that their culture is thriving, and then allowing them or helping them to take that externally. Because until they've got things working the way how they should be internally, it doesn't matter so much what they're doing externally, especially with non-for-profits, because they burn through their people, right? It's such challenging work. So how do we create those systems and supports and create safe environments for them to have that trust and community internally within their organization? That's really how I sort of look at it now with the work that I'm doing. I still teach. And again, that's about bringing people together so that they can explore what they're able to do. That's one of the things I love with, I think, all the work I do, whether it's training. I work with instructors all over the world now with one of the other companies that I'm a part of, mentoring instructors. And it's all about, I love being able to see people discover what they are truly capable of.
Mm.
And then they're able to, especially with the instructors that I work with, they're able to then take that out and share that with their communities.
Beautiful. I know fitness is a real passion for you. Does it show up in the business and kind of strategic aspects of your work as well? Do you make it part of that sort of
Yeah,
conversation around culture?
it shows up actually physically in
Mm.
some of the client engagements. I think part of the fact why I feel so comfortable being able to get up in front of, if we're running, facilitation or something, is because of that background in fitness and just being able to get up in front of a room. So that's one piece. But Lauren and I were actually just in Toronto with a client, and they had us come in for a full day of team building. And so the first thing in the morning, we had movement. And I taught an eccentrics class and took everybody through the movement before we got into the rest of the day. So just being able to have that space to be able for people to move in their bodies and sort of, free their minds from whatever they
Mm.
think they're going to be going into is really helpful. It was funny that morning, Lauren and I were getting ready to go to the client, and I was really, really anxious, and I couldn't explain to her why. I was like, I haven't felt this way in a long time. I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, and I don't know why. So we're driving there, and she's like, oh God, this is great. And then I taught the class. And she was like, you're
Mm.
a completely different person now, like totally relaxed, ready to go, and just in the groove for the rest of the day. So for me, it's really helps like my mental health and my nervous system. And I hope that other people, feel the same way after they've done
Mm.
that.
I was going to say there's such a huge lesson just in that piece because of the importance of movement and embodiment and integration of that with respect to mental health, something we're seeing showing up in the workplace more and more.
Yeah.
And I think really does have a more comprehensive wellness solution rather than just kind of therapy or medication and those kinds of things. It's so how do we look at that kind of big picture and address it from a cultural point of view and a physical point of view as well? I think that's fantastic. Anything more that you'd want to share on that in terms of your experience, either personally or what you're seeing in organizations?
Um, so I'm thinking one of the things I guess that we've been seeing a lot this, well, over the last little while is, we spend a lot of time working with clients on strategic plans, and then, ensuring that the leadership and the team are capable of implementing is really important for us. Um, but we've seen with a few clients, and we're grappling with how to work with them now, is, we work with the board, we get this fantastic plan, people are excited, and then they're having the difficulty of actually being able to bring it into the organization and have people
Mm.
understand it. um, so what we've been finding, we've been doing a lot more with clients, is having the teams and the staff more involved from the beginning in that strategic planning, so that there's an understanding,
Mm.
and or making sure that that leadership team really understands. Obviously if it's a large organization, we can't have everybody involved, but we do get their involvement prior to actually going into the strat plan. We make sure that we ask the staff and the team and the community the questions that are required to actually be able to have them create what's needed for the community, but then really ensuring that that feedback loop is continuous. So before something is completed, we go back and, how is this landing with people? How is this landing with the team? So really ensuring that nobody's taken by surprise when, whatever's been created is, rolled out to the team. So trying to work a little bit more with that. We've had a client recently who sort of disappointingly sort of backpedal. They're not living what they say they want to live. So we're now having to go in and try to work with the leadership team
Mm.
and deal with a little bit of the fallout that's actually happening with they've got leadership leaving because they're not actually walking the walk
Mm.
that they say they want to do.
Nick, anything?
Laurissa,
Sorry.
yeah, I was just going to say you've either alluded to or said community collaboration and create a few times so far here in our conversation,
You
which
were
I
on my
believe are your
website.
core. I believe those are your core values. You certainly live them, that's for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
You were talking about the entrepreneurial spirit and how, it's once you have it, it's kind of hard to work for people. I share that too. I'm sure you do too as well, Nick. But one thing that I've learned in my work and in partnership with Nick Matheson on the call is the importance of collaboration, and being one of your core values. I'm just curious, can you tell us a little bit more about what that means to you?
Yeah, well, I think my three values really sit quite closely together. They're not independent on their own. So I believe that really in order to be able to create that community, you need to be able to collaborate with others. It can't just be done with one person. So it's really about bringing together other individuals to create that community and bringing together different skill sets and mindsets and really, really working together. That's what I see that collaboration piece
Mm-hmm.
being. Yeah.
Okay, great. And what about create? What are you doing to create right now?
So I think with the creation, I've always been one who loves to build things. Think about things, but then more than think about them, like how do we get them actually so that they exist? So I love working with my partner Lauren because she is a manifester.
Hmm.
So that obviously is going to help in that creation, right? So the two of us together have this energy and that allows us to really be able to make things happen, I think. When we hear from our clients, when we just hear from different people that we spend time with, they just that's one of the things they comment on is the energy that the two of us have, but that we're able to look at things in a different way and be able to get them where they need to go and create whatever that is that we've set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
I know you've done some work with diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. Can you speak a bit more to that work and how you see that in organizations, how essential it is for collaboration and multiple perspectives?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I've done some studies and a little bit of work and sort of grappled with where do we sit within the DEI? When I say we, I mean DLM. Where do we sit within the DEIB um, sort of world? And originally, I thought I should go and learn more about it because I was getting asked all the time, and
Mm,
I was getting asked because I was a Black woman, to be quite frank.
hmm.
I think. And I don't think that qualifies you necessarily to be able to go in and be a DEIB expert in an organization. So I said, well, let me learn a little bit more about this. Um, so I did some studying, took a fabulous program actually through Dell. Really got to meet some interesting people who are in the DEI world on a day-to-day basis. That's their role. So I learned a ton from them. Through the programming, I also recognized that it aligned completely with all of the leadership methodologies and principles that we'd been using. It was just being spoken about in a different language, but it was the
Mm,
exact same stuff. I could really tie all the pieces in together. So when we go into organizations, and I'm going to change this on my website, by the way, Nick, so that it's not there. I don't see us or I don't see me as a DEIB expert. I'm able to
mm,
take some of those principles and apply them. So ensuring that they're built into the strategy. So how are we
mm,
including those principles? How are we thinking about them from the get-go, that they're not a bolt-on that just happens? And then ensuring both top down and bottom up that they're in the organization. But I definitely by no means consider myself to be any type of expert. And we've been getting, we get calls in it, and I'll actually be like, no, I think there's somebody better who can assist you here if you're looking for something very specific. So for me, it's really the integration and
mm,
just using, like I said, those principles versus, going in and really what some experts would do. We also, the other thing we get called on a lot is that for some reason people think we're governance experts. And we're like, we don't know where this came from either. So it's really, trying to be clear on, what our role is, what our parameters are, and how we can, how we can help. So the DEI is, like I said, is an interesting one. Because we've had a lot of people since we started, especially in the non-for-profit world. That's the first thing they're reaching out for when they're doing their new strat plans is, well, how do we include more diversity, equity, and inclusion in there? And so what we're seeing with a lot of the clients that we've worked with over the last 2 years is, and I think COVID is obviously a piece of it, they're recognizing that they need to change. There's something that needs to change within the organization if they're going to be able to continue to exist, but more than exist, be successful in the areas that they need to be. And so for a lot of them, the first place they want to go is that DEI. And so when we are working with them, we are looking at how are you building this into your team? What do you have already? What does your team even look like? Right?
Mm.
Like it's really interesting when we go in, and if we go into like, mainly, all white organizations, which is fine, but what is the diversity? So yes, there is diversity of thought, but what else is there diversity within your organization? How are you bringing that in? We had one organization that we worked with, and they really wanted to bring in, I'll call them clients, diverse clients, but they had no diverse representation within their team or their staff who would be in contact with these individuals 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So we were like, we think you need to start internally with your organization, start to build and grow that diversity within your organization before you can ask people to come in and be open to feeling that they are included and that they belong within the organization, because they won't stay. So just having those types of conversations is what we've been doing a lot.
Yeah, really hearing the importance of that inside out approach of kind of, as an individual, as a culture, that it does need to start internally. And love what you're saying about integration, right? To make sure that it's working throughout all aspects of the organization.
Yeah.
You talked about your family and kind of growing up in an entrepreneurial family, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know some of them. Tell me a little bit more about that influence and how it's inspired your journey, just where that all comes from in your background.
Yeah, interesting. I guess really it all comes from, I think, my mom's father. He had a restaurant and a nightclub in Sydney. They used to bring in, like, I didn't even realize it, like really big named acts for like Sydney, Nova Scotia. Like they had Sammy Davis Jr. there, and like, yeah, like it's Sydney, right? So anyway, so it started there. And so by the time I knew my grandparents, they weren't doing those things. My grandmother was a singer. She would travel. She was on the CBC, so she performed in the club, but she also used to travel, and that's why she performed with Sammy Davis Jr. and a few other people. So she had always done that type of thing. So when I was younger, my dad's a psychologist. He's always had his own practice. Oh yeah, I've worked in there a couple of times too. So being a psychologist, ran his own practice. Then of course, him being the only one wasn't enough. So he actually saw a need in bringing together support workers for youth, and he was the first one that actually created that model here. Community Services has since taken it, but he had created the support worker where youth workers would go and work with models. So I managed that part of the business. Don't know how, but I did. And then when I was like 14, they opened a restaurant. Not really sure how that came to be. I know my mom loved to cook and loved to bake and all those types of things, but prior to that, she was a teacher. And so they opened 2 restaurants in Halifax. It was called Desserts Plus. And so I was there like through all my junior high years, pretty much. So it was a little before junior high and into high school. And so I saw the running of the business and the staff and the people. and the hard times of it too.
Mm.
I remember those times. I think people think that entrepreneurship or owning your own business is quite glamorous. Um, Far from it, I think. I remember, I mean, it's a silly thing, but I remember us having to sell, vehicles because we couldn't afford them anymore. I remember, we would be having like turkey drumsticks for like months on end because that was the cheapest thing that we could afford to buy when like things weren't going well in the restaurant. But my parents still had this perseverance, right? And they just kept
Mm.
going. And so I guess what I learned from that, and then they closed the restaurant. My mom went back to teaching. My dad had continued his practice the whole time. He was actually he would see patients in the restaurant. Like there would just be a table off to the side where they would be seen.
Perfect.
Yeah, right. So I'm
Mm.
sure there's something not great about that. But so when they closed the business, they went back to their sort of day jobs, I guess if you want to call it that. Then my mom went and got her MBA, and then my dad, he's the idea guy. He just has these ideas. So somehow he decided that he wanted to create this software algorithm, an algorithm that could search. And this was at the same time, Google was just starting at this time. And so they started an IT company and they partnered with Dal and they brought in some of the best minds and the best students and were able to build the company from, like 3 people to over 50 people. The company was never known in Canada because it was all global. It was outside of Canada, and so they built that out. So I guess what I've learned from the entrepreneurial piece of my family is that one, anything's possible, and that you just never give up. Like you can always do what you need to do, I think. So that's really what I've seen.
Those are
And
great lessons.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And how would you sum up all of that experience and kind of what you've gone on with your own journey, the coaching work that you're doing today? What advice would you give to leaders with the current situation that they're facing in the world? What's the core of what you would like them to know?
Hmm, that's a good question. That one you should have said to me in advance. No.
Uh,
The core message. I think with leaders, I think part of it is, you know, when I look at, some of the organizations and the team and whatnot, and I think about my parents and their businesses, what they always did is they were always true to their people. So
mm,
to their teams, to their staff. Sometimes I think maybe to their detriment. Um, but at the same time, I think really having that genuine concern and love of your team and people is so important. And I often say that, and I don't know if this is a Dorothy thing, but businesses are just brick and mortar. Without the people, there's nothing. Like it's
mm,
hollow. So we really need to ensure that we take care of our teams, we take care of our people, but also not at the detriment of ourselves. So ensuring that we take care of ourselves both mentally and physically. And I think sometimes for me, I've gone like almost to the extreme on that, maybe a little bit selfish on self-care. But at the same time, I will always say that if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of anybody else. So, I think, ensuring that you really take care of your people, but ensure that you look after yourself, you love yourself, and that you make that time and space to be able um, to be what you need to be for your families, for your organization, for all that you want to be able to do in this world.
thank you. Great advice.
Yep. Thanks.
And you embody it beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
I think that might be a great place to end. That's a wonderful message. I think we've learned a lot here today, and we really appreciate having you on the podcast. Laurissa, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience that you didn't get to talk about today?
I don't think so. I think I sort of went all over the place.
Yeah.
And share. But I just want to thank both of you for having me. I really enjoyed having the conversation. It was great that it was just a discussion too, and not like set questions or anything.
Good. Laurissa, where can our listeners find you if they want to reach out for your services or learn more about you?
Sure. So you can find me in a couple different places. If you're interested in coaching services in regard to your business, you can find me at DLM.coach. If you're interested in movement, you can find me on Instagram at Made for Movement.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. Well, Laurissa Manning, episode number 37 of The Interesting People You Meet. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate having you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Laurissa.
Thanks, Nick.